glitching? Okay. So, welcome to our GenAI panel for this academic year. So, the theme for this time is called Debunking AI Myths in Education. As you can see, there's a lot of misconceptions going on with the increasing use of AI in education. So, this panel specifically, we're introducing our three lovely speakers today. Later, we're going to introduce them, and we shall begin. I'm just going to introduce myself. So Grace and I and Sophie are moderating for this panel today. I'm Eva. I am the Vice President of EIE Society this year.
I'm Grace, and I'm the other Vice President of EIE.
And I'm Sophie. I'm the President of EIE Society.
So we're not really sure how many of you are familiar with the EIE Society. The EIE Society stands for Education, Innovation, and Entrepreneurship. So as a society, what we do is we cover all things education, technology, AI, and innovative curriculums related. And I assume a lot of you come from the IOE, which is perfect because basically what we cover is the crossover between tech and education. And we're really excited to have you all here today. And we're going to be hosting a lot more of these events throughout the year, so make sure to check that out as well. So let's begin with a short intro of each speaker, starting with Matthew.
Hi everyone, I'm Matt, here I am, without my glasses on, sorry. Background to me, I'm currently Managing Director of an edtech company owned by Sage Publishing. Hopefully you've come across our academic articles. We do a lot of social sciences, humanities research. The company has a number of different products under it. One of them is Talus, which is reading list software that you also use at UCL. The other is Lean Library, which is a productivity tool. And we've done a few experiments on AI. One with our colleagues at Sage on AI tutor for research methods. And then a few other things on automating processes. But I also have my own startup called Citizens, which is like a LinkedIn for students. The idea is to create portfolios for skills and civic development, and it came out of my PhD research, which I completed a few years ago right here at IOE on citizenship and skills. Nice to meet you.
Thank you, Matthew. Now moving on to Usman.
Hi everyone, my name is Usman. As for my background, I started off as an electrical engineer but got bored very quickly and pivoted right into education. I was doing teaching for 2 and so years in low-income communities around our federal capital in Pakistan, Islamabad, and that's where I ground a lot of my passion for education, being in classrooms where seeing deep-rooted problems and finding solutions for those problems. And then I, very early on, before this whole AI boom, saw the importance of technology in education, but doing that meaningfully and not just tokenizing it. And that brought me to Oxford, where I did my master's in critical edtech studies. It was a little more critical than I wanted it to be, but it's good to have all perspectives. And currently I lead a lot of our quality assurance work at Fabbing. So Fabbing is a not-for-profit which makes sure AI tools are used equitably in low and middle-income countries. So our focus is a lot in Sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia. So a lot of the contexts where kids are usually left behind. So we work in K-12 context in those countries. And yeah, very excited to be here and try to find answers together.
And now moving on to Georgina.
Good evening, I'm Georgina, and that's me also. And my background is in K-12 education, so I graduated out of Canada as a French and music teacher, and then went overseas and have been traveling around the Middle East and Africa and North America for 20 years doing digital transformation for schools. So I've worked in British, American, Canadian curriculums, supporting whole school digital transformation. So basically taking schools on chalkboards and on local devices and taking them into the cloud, supporting teachers with training, building a digital strategy with the senior leadership teams, and supporting parents on how they are handling technology at home as well. COVID, the wonderful lockdown, brought us here to England because you guys were doing really good with the vaccine rollout. So we came here a couple of years ago. We've been here ever since. And when AI boomed, I decided it was an opportunity to help scale my impact with more than just the single international school that I was supporting each year. So I've gone out on my own as an edtech startup founder, and I am solving the problem for students being able to use AI safely in the schools. We're starting to see that some edtech companies that are out there, some of the big tech have already started solving for that. But so there's a slight pivot in it, but equally with the focus for under 13s is the big priority. And here we are today. So I'm looking forward to our chat.
Georgina, to introduce yourself and all three speakers for coming today. We definitely have a really nice, rich variety of backgrounds coming in to speak for our panel today, which is really exciting. Now I'm just going to introduce about what is the structure of the panel going to be like. We're first going to start with an interactive panel of me asking some quite common misconceptions that we figured as a committee to our three speakers. And then we're going to dive into our interactive Q&A where my committee member will hand me some microphones if you have some questions in mind. So feel free to jot down some questions while you're listening to the panel, and then you have the opportunity to then speak out loud. Without further ado, let's get started to our first question. So we were wondering that there's a growing fear that AI is replacing whether that's students' ability to think critically or the role of teachers or even existing learning tools. So how can we reframe AI as a partner in learning rather than a replacement for human thinking and teaching?
Any of us?
Any of you?
Go ahead. Shall I
Oh,
start
I thought
then?
you, yeah,
Oh,
you.
okay. I think it's really, really important. I do believe that AI is not going to replace humans, but there is a saying you've probably heard floating around on the media that says it will replace humans who don't know how to use AI though. So it's important that we look at growing skills as sort of like a co-pilot, as something to support you in your skills building. As far as critical thinking goes, it's humans that built the AI, right? It's humans that are building the technology that are behind it. So they're not going away anywhere, but how can we support accessibility so that everybody has access to learn? Yeah, I'll leave it there for my partners. Right here.
Thank you, Georgina, for being the brave one and getting us started. So I do think that it starts with the change in our mindsets. So I think very much that when AI came along, people across the world started using it very much as an answering machine, and I don't think it was meant to be used as that. So it could be very simple for us to say that don't use AI when it's 10 minutes to your assignment submission and you just go into ChatGPT and say write me an essay on etc. So it's that, but then thinking more systematically, I do think that using AI to support a lot of the learning processes takes effort, and it takes effort from both the students and the teachers. One thing that I really like that we've experimented with in the field is something known as collaborative philosophical inquiry. It's a mouthful, but then what it does is it prompts students to sift through different theories possible, and then AI could very well be used to do it as a partner. So a lot of my colleagues, myself included, we on a regular basis, instead of going to AI on just finding answers, we go to it and we say, this is what we had in mind. What do you think? And give us some data on that. Give us a bit on this, and we have a discussion with it. And we don't take anything it says on ground reality. And when we translate this for students, then a lot of brilliant people around the world have started implementing similar similar strategies in their classroom. So one particular professor that I would quote here is Ethan Mollick. He's at University of Pennsylvania, and I really like his work. What he wrote a very impactful blog called Homework Apocalypse. So he said that, you know, there is no point in us saying to students don't use AI, because they are going to. Instead, what we could do, and it brings me back to the question about reframing the use of AI. What we could do is, you know, like ask them to use AI and then submit their conversation history, just to know, you know, what they are asking it, and then how they came to a certain output. So not being too output focused, but more focusing on the process of learning is I think where it is at with AI and how we reframe its use.
That's amazing. How am I going to follow that? I love that point of the process versus the outcome. And in fact, someone much wiser than me said that when you're thinking about where to integrate AI, it's helpful to think about what matters most. Is it the process or the outcome? And if it's the outcome, and it's like, you know, writing a really boring report where you've already got the data elsewhere, then maybe the process doesn't matter, and actually AI can help streamline that. But if it's learning, then of course process really matters. And so, actually, I have to be honest, recently I've been challenging myself more on why should AI be in learning, having been such a early enthusiast of all that it could achieve, and I still am very much an enthusiast. But I think that the best use cases of AI in learning are where it comes later on in the developmental process, and so you can have those really great conversations that challenge your thinking, but where students already have the critical thinking abilities and they've learned the research skills to be able to question the model. But at a younger age, can they really do that? I don't think they maybe can. But also, there are then these other areas to consider. We were just talking about before we started about the difference between, for example, an international school like Georgina and I work with, and a low income school that you've worked with before, where sometimes there may be risks to deploying AI at a younger age, but the benefits massively outweigh that. If you are in a classroom of 50, 60 students and one teacher, then clearly having that AI tutor available to you through a free AI tool is really powerful and dramatically improve learning. Whereas if you're in an international school and you're a group of, 7 to 10-year-old kids, do you necessarily need to bring in AI so early? Or could you focus on those skills that later on will allow students to use AI most successfully, like the critical thinking, the ability to converse effectively as well. So that's what I've been thinking about recently, right? I'm still constantly thinking about it and why I wanted to come here to hear what everyone else thinks, because I don't have the answers. But those are my questions.
Yeah, see, that's really interesting for Matt bringing up about what age you are in terms of integrating AI. That actually brings me to a specific question to Georgina, as she's been working in the K-12 industry for a long time. So I was wondering, with your experience in the K-12 industry, what do you see as the differences or the parallel of AI usage in K-12 industry compared with universities?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And it was really interesting. I'd love to follow on what Matt was saying as well about at what age do we start? Do students start? It was Women's International Day on the 8th of March every year, and I was asked to visit a school just outside of London, and they were asking us questions, and I was asking the students questions, and we were a bunch of women. And the students, when I asked them, how many of you, and they were like 8 to 10-year-olds are using AI, all the hands go up. And then how many of you have younger brothers and sisters? Most hands go up. How many of them are using AI at home? And the hands start to go less and less the younger you get, right? But the point is, if 10 to 12-year-olds are already using AI at home, then the critical question comes next: who taught you to use the AI? And no child had the answer. So answers that came out were, I taught myself, or my friend taught me, or my older brother or sister from, in high school years taught me. And so it comes back to the big question is to how are we taking accountability in K-12 education support that ecosystem, right? To support the students who are using it and to support the parents who may not have the technical skills to be able to support their children at home. And this is largely the type of work that I do to support schools currently around the world, and so thank you for the question. We know that, as I think Usman said, they are using the artificial intelligence at home and outside of the school walls. So what are we going to do to help them to learn to use it responsibly, safely, ethically, and critically? So back to your original question as well about critical thinking. And I know we're going to talk about that later, but it's really, really important that we help students with digital citizenship. So something of interest in the K-12 sector, for example, is the ISTE certification and ISTE standards for learning. If you are going to consider working in the K-12 area, that's really important. This type of certification coming out of North America is a global international standards for teaching and technology use around the world, and it helps teachers and coaches and leaders learn about things like digital citizenship, about co-learning together, about online safety, about data, about ethics, and different things like that. So I strongly encourage, if you're interested, that's a little takeaway for that. As far as the parallels go, I like to compare it a little bit to a swimming pool. So in a swimming pool, I don't have any of my own children. If any of you in the room do, we wouldn't let like a 3-year-old just go swim on their own in the pool, right? They would need, what are those called? Wings, I think? You know, the orange floaties? Floaties, flaps, yes. And we wouldn't leave them. And the other thing we want to make sure is that there's a lifeguard, right? A lifeguard there to save them. So right now, based on what I first shared with you about feedback from children, if they're using it outside the classroom, is there a lifeguard there to help them? Probably not, right? And so how do we provide that lifeguard? We want to make sure that the ecosystem is safe for them to use. That includes things like filtering and monitoring to make sure that they're not accessing things that are not safe for them, right? And that there are structures in place to support that. That includes scaffolding and all the way up through the developmental stages. I like to think in the high school level, and I don't have experience in higher education. It's such a delight to be here with all of you today. So I'm looking to my colleagues here for support with that. But usually in like the high school phase and abroad, I like to compare it a bit to like the swimming coach then. So the coach is like there to help them focus more on technique. They can swim. They're now in the deep end of the pool, right? But now we're focusing on swimming technique. And are they sort of race ready? Can they perform in competition, right? And it's a little bit like that with AI. How do we scaffold things at the appropriate pedagogically developmental phase so that we can prepare them? So back to what Matt was saying earlier, and then I'll pass it over. A really great example of how we support students using AI in the classroom at an early age. For example, in a literacy lesson in English, teacher wants to ask students to do a character development activity to start to prepare their story, okay? Or even with an introduction, what does the setting look like? So a teacher could pull up something like Adobe Firefly, for example, or any image generator, LLM, and ask the students, what could we ask it as far as descriptors go to then create an image? So what we're seeing is the teacher can navigate, can be the driver of the artificial intelligence and still include younger students in a conversation so that the students are visibly exposed. And when things come back, the teacher easily can say to a 5-year-old, how many fingers is this person holding up? And if the LLM, the AI, has hallucinated and there's 6 fingers on the hand, that's an open conversation with students about, well, why is that not right? And what do you think happened there? So it's how do we provide the mechanisms and the scaffolding to help students learn from a very young age without them even having to be the drivers yet, because that's not safe just yet. So I have a lot more ideas, but I'll pause there and pass it over to my colleagues. But I hope that helps a little bit with the age thing.
Thank you.
Oh,
Georgina.
sorry.
Sorry. I think what you said about responsible use of AI as well as safeguarding is very prevalent in this day and age. And it actually moves on to our next question. So
students and teachers worry about whether AI breaks down academic integrity, how can we keep assessments authentic in the AI era? And maybe we can start with Usman.
Yeah, I really like this question, and I would like to challenge you a little by calling out what do we mean by authentic assessments? Because before we even look to what AI is doing to assessments, we need to challenge that the current model of assessments that we have around the world, the standardized model of measuring intelligence and then deciding every kid's future from progression along K-12 and then making it to university and then finding jobs afterwards. Is that really the right system? And just thinking about it and just reflecting, this question of new technologies coming and disrupting the assessment space is not new. It has always been there when radio came along, and then afterwards when many of these MOOCs came along, people got worried what would happen to universities, what would happen to assessments. So I do think that the advent of these new models and technologies make it so that we reflect on what the current state of assessments are in the world. But then also the way I think about it is how these AI models can what assessments look like in the generation or era of these AI models is you need to go back to what we were discussing earlier about focusing on the process and not the output, because currently we focus too much on the output. So think about it, and when's the last time in a real job setting you had to submit an essay on something in 20 minutes? And that's currently what our assessment systems measure us on. And everyone is a different kind of exam taker. I could be very much better than at handling time anxiety than my partners, and I'm being awarded for that and they are being penalized for that. So is that the right model? So in the age of AI, I think what we need to do is reconceptualize the way we do assessments. And I have a few suggestions, obviously. We could very well make our assessments not be just so output focused, but rather we have presentations or group projects where we make students reflect on how they actually arrived on that output, how they used AI. So yeah, those were my ideas. And if I were a teacher again in today's era, I know that's where I would be starting from.
I completely agree with everything you both said. I just want to add that there's some really interesting studies at the moment about the pressure that students feel to use AI in order to get the best possible grade. And that can't be right, because at the same time, those same students recognize that in using AI, they have, in a way, diminished their learning experience and come out of having done a particular program and feel like they have the credential, but not the skills or the learning that's meant to come from it. The most extreme example of that is these agents that you can see now that can go into your learning management system and do the whole course for you. But there are much more subtle examples of that. Like, I'm sure I do this all the time, when you're using ChatGPT to help you write a message or write your essay. I realized recently that I've become quite reliant on it sometimes to my detriment, when I'm having to write emails to my team and want to make sure the tone is right, etc. And I'm trying to stop myself sometimes from doing that. Maybe I should just give in completely, or I don't know yet. But I find that dilemma for students really interesting. It comes back to the whole thing about, at some point there needs to be a bit of a reckoning around assessment. What is authentic assessment, exactly as you say, like what are we assessing for? And then also a reckoning for what education is for. Is it the credential at the end of it that helps us get the job? You've had a first-class degree from UCL, you go into McKinsey or whatever it might be, or is it that it's the skills and the learning from that you need for the rest of your life? And it would be patronizing and unreasonable to say to students they should focus on the learning for life when getting a job after university is what matters most. And I would do the same if I was thinking now. But if there's a way that we can challenge that, I think that probably would, to me, that would be the front line of AI right now, would be to working out how we can best prepare students to enter a workplace where their jobs and their skills are going to have to change so frequently. And we can't do that if it's basically using this Ferrari of learning the AI model to pass exams and assessments that's based back on industrial era education. That's probably wrong.
Technology is moving at such a rapid pace. Nobody can keep up with it, myself or anybody. So, there's this thing about people saying, "Oh, I'm an AI expert and I'm an AI consultant." Yet the three of us, before we sat up here, just said none of us have the answers, and that's really the approach we need to take. And it's the same with assessments. It's the same with digital strategy. I believe it's really important to look at things imaginatively and innovatively and think about alternative assessment. So for example, why can't we have a dialogue? Why can't we have a round table discussion? Asking students to show and demonstrate their skills and knowledge in ways that cannot be answered by the AI, right? And so, I'm a visual facilitator as well, and so why not having students do a sketch note, right? That's a mixture of note, images, and text to demonstrate their knowledge. They can show metaphors that way in all sorts of video projects, project-based learning. So there's a lot of different ways we're trying to explore so that we can make sure that we're challenging the critical thinking skills of the students and not just, as these gentlemen have said, the outputs. And I do believe the other important thing with assessments is, even though a lot of teachers, what we're seeing in K-12, and I'm not sure if that's the same in higher ed, are teaching to the assessments, that means that they're working backwards by design from the questions on an assessment. What we're trying to say is those are there, but we're helping teachers to plan, what's the word I'm looking for, plan simultaneously, side by side, on projects that will show the skills of the questions that need to be answered and focus on that. And when students have, with intention, meaningful, purposeful learning experience where they're engaged in the learning, then they will be able to synthesize and relate that knowledge and information to be able to answer those questions on the assessment. So it's about, until the governments and all the powers that be are able to come up with a non-industrialized way of providing assessments, that's how we're trying to navigate it. Yesterday I had the honor of supporting the Future Diversity from the Open University, their research project launch on neurodiversity and creativity yesterday at West College London. And it was beautiful to see students, the work that was showcased there at the launch. Students and this was at the higher education, so it was really great for me to see since I don't have experience there. And students at that age were creating like ceramic envelopes, and they were doing a lot of art activities. So how does creativity support neurodivergence? And one of the main outputs from the research paper was that nobody asked to go to the toilet during the lesson. And I just pause on that because that is something, I've been an educator for over 20 years, and if you are an educator, if you've been there, you'll know that that's very typical. People will be distracted and want to do other things, leave the room, talk to their friends, etc. But when we provide experiences that are engaging and enriched, that people don't want to go to recess and they don't want to go to the bathroom, that's where the crux is. And those are the experiences that we want them to access when they get to a question they have to answer on an assessment. The last thing I wanted to touch on, since I've also done recruitment at the international schools for people like teachers and leaders, IT technicians, I agree with Matt for sure. A question that I have never asked anybody in an interview process is, can you tell me what your grades were on your GCSEs or your A-levels? Can you tell me the 5th paragraph of this essay that you wrote? The kinds of questions that I'm asking people when I'm going through the interview process are, can you tell me about a difficult time you had with a colleague and how you worked through that with them? Can you tell me about a time that you didn't know the answer and how did you seek collaboration to find the solution? And tell me a time when you were really scared and you didn't know what to do. How did you go about it? You'll notice that all of those 3 questions ask about process-oriented questions, which is what Usman and Matt are talking about too. So we absolutely, I do believe, need to focus on a balance between academia and skills, because when students get out into the real world, we don't need to ask students about information anymore because we can get that easily now in the age of AI, and I think that's the crux of what I want to share. Okay, I spoke a lot, sorry.
Lovely, thank you for the depth of your answer. Just noticing I was slightly short of time here.
Sorry, okay.
No worries. I got just quite a short and crisp question coming up. So it's about how can we balance, like in terms of should university fully embrace AI now or wait until, when AI is fully justified, as you guys mentioned before, like the safeguarding issues, etc. What should universities be responding to this?
I don't mind, sorry. Well, Usman and I were talking before we started about Oxford and how I don't think you saw their announcement. They said they're going to give ChatGPT to every student. We were both a bit critical of that. I went to Oxford myself, so obviously a lot of admiration for it, but it just felt like it wasn't done with a lot of, going back to that language there, wasn't done with necessarily enough focus. And it felt like quite a blunt instrument. And I imagine what happened was they felt the pressure to be responding to the trend and just showing how it's Oxford, we're always at the forefront, etc. But that to me would probably be an example of maybe, not how not to do it, but not necessarily the best possible example. I think the best examples that I see in the universities that we sell into and talk to would be where they do little pilot projects and where they partner up really interesting mixes of students, faculty, and senior faculty. So they might have undergraduate students with a PhD student that's monitoring what's going on as part of their research, and then maybe also a senior postdoc there as well. And so you've got a whole mix of people that are using the AI to learn, someone that's doing a report on the efficacy, there you go, connect that back to you. And then also someone that has the experience of all of those difficult questions that Georgina knows about around research integrity and around safeguarding and where's the data going to go and things like that. So I would say that, again, to copy what Georgina said before, there's not really an option not to do something because you know that your students are going to be using it. So you've got to get in there and show them how to use it effectively. But I would say fully embrace, not maybe carefully embrace or embrace with focus. That would be my take.
Yeah, and Matt gave a pretty brief reply. So, and I admire his politeness in taking Oxford, his attempt at being polite. But yeah, I do think that there is balance between fearful paralysis when it comes to adopting these AI models or technologies, and then on the other hand, mindless rollout, something along the lines of what Oxford just did. But I do think also that universities cannot afford to sit on the sidelines. And the example that Matt gave of one of the models that he described, that these professors at these universities, ivory tower, and they have these postdoc, PhD people doing cutting-edge research. They need to be the people who are running and designing these pilots and collaborating with industry, because the industry is not going to slow down anytime soon. We talk to a lot of the big tech organizations. One day it's ChatGPT 4.5. 3 months later it's ChatGPT 5, and 3 more months later it's going to be 5.5 or whatever. And I very distinctly remember, one of the top executives from OpenAI sitting at one of the panels and saying, I can bet that if the current ChatGPT model or other frontier models that we currently have is not smarter than you, the next one will be. So there is no time for universities to be avoiding being part of this. And I have a couple of brilliant examples of few universities taking the lead in this. So University of Pennsylvania, as I mentioned earlier, Ethan Mollick is from. That is one of the universities that are doing a lot of work on this. They published research not too long ago, which was generative AI can harm learning, and then they showed that if you give access to students of this based ChatGPT, their learning outcomes will improve because they have access to something that the control doesn't. But then surprisingly, when you take its access away, they perform worse than control. So we would not have found that out if it were not for the brilliant researchers at these universities. Then similarly, EPFL in Switzerland is doing a lot of work around AI feedback. A lot of good research studies coming out of these universities. So I would say that other universities that are more either conservative when it comes to AI adoption or on the other end, such as Oxford, should learn from best practices around the world and yet be more proactive but not mindlessly rolling it out.
I like this point on not mindlessly rolling it out, and it comes back again to intention and purpose is what I would love to leave on is the same with anything in education and anything in life. When we get up in the morning, are we just randomly going about the day, or do we have classes to go to? Do we have a job to go to? Do we have to walk the dog, right? And it's the same in a classroom. The intention isn't just to do X, Y, Z. Therefore, what is the need of the learners? What is the need that your students have? For me, AI is a huge benefit, not just for productivity and efficiency, but for inclusion and accessibility. There are many students who are not able to access certain parts of learning for neurodivergence and other, etc. And so AI can help to solve some of those issues and can help like our SEND departments, etc. in the schools. I do believe at the end of the day, I don't know if any of you know the company NVIDIA, if that name rings a bell in America. Okay, so if you watch GTC yearly, you'll have seen their owner Jensen on stage with robots. We're in the age of robots, and robots are coming, like real robots that will clean the kitchen for you and things like this. This is what is forecasted. And so we have this big spectrum of, oh my gosh, I don't want to use AI because it's cheating. And then in the next decade, there's people going to have robots in their houses helping them and self-driving cars. So we have to close that gap by working together. If K-12 schools that I support, for example, are going to help scaffold some schools up with AI, and then they get to a university with one of these gentlemen where no AI is permitted, that's going to be a huge gap. Who do you think is going to get the job at the end of the day? We need to work together for a student's entire learning journey from when they begin to when they finish university with a full skill set of human skills, of technology skills that are balanced and that can partner together. That is where the real magic is going to happen, is the human and the AI together. I'm very passionate about that, sorry.
I would just want to jump on that.
Yeah, please.
So I really like that point. I was thinking the other day though that, so I can see with a university where the students will be using AI, if you're not doing anything on AI, then it's a massive risk to their learning, etc. But equally, if you were interested, and if you were, from my perspective, advice to a student right now, I would say worry less about knowing all that you can about AI and how to use it, because the models now are getting so intuitive to use, and they're going to be so baked into the apps that you use every day, whether you want to be a graphic designer or whether you want to vibe code and create a startup or whatever. It's all going to be more and more easy for someone without coding experience or without detailed knowledge of how an LLM works to use. That actually, if it's a choice, and it always is a choice of prioritization of your time, I would spend your time on your own innate understanding of things and your critical thinking and your deep domain expertise in wherever you are passionate. So really understanding about, say, neurodiversity in education, I want to focus on being an expert in that, and then I'd worry about how I'm going to use AI to revolutionize that space later on, because that bit feels like the easier bit now. And the thing that's better for your career is that domain expertise.
Fancy UI UX layer on these base models. These frontier AI labs, these open AIs and Googles and Metas, they catch up with you. And it recently happened, it was all over the news, I'm sure many of you might have heard this. There was a big market for these AI agentic workflow builders. So when these AI agents came along and people realized that it is not quite as intuitive to build these agents or these agentic workflows, ago. So people started creating these startups with very high, crazy valuations backed by VC money. These tools that made it intuitive for anyone to create an agentic workflow. And then when OpenAI dropped their agent builder, all of them just went to it's just not a very clean or sustainable business model as I see it. And then when we talk about creating educational value, so this is like the core of my day every single day. So I see three things that I can boil it down to. One is having very contextually, if you are an edtech developer, that is having very contextually relevant data set that you're going to train your models or these base models on, so that you have a unique setting point for your target consumers. You're not just building a fancy layer, a wrapper on these models, or just making API calls to OpenAI and just selling your product by saying that it's the next best thing, right? So A is having a very grounded and contextually relevant data set, and we see a lot of now startups do that in the low middle income space. So a lot of the labs in, let's say, Uganda or Nigeria are doing this. They have rich data from the past many years of their operations, and they're using this data now to train their own models that are not going to be replaced if ChatGPT, let's say, tomorrow drops a new update of their base model. Second thing I see is seamless integration in existing educational processes. So teachers, all of us who have been in classrooms, we know that we do not need yet another app that we would require 2 weeks to learn. That is just not good for teachers, and there's just not enough time, especially in low middle income countries where teacher to student ratio is crazy. Each teacher on average has 50 to 55 students, and that's average. There are very many worse cases. So it needs to be the integration needs to be very seamless into existing processes in the schools. And then the third one I would say is having a very solid pedagogical framework of your tool that is grounded in learning science. And it's a good thing now in the space from when I started working in it, that many of these big tech organizations and also the trickle down effect, these startups are now have now started working on all three of them at least, and if not all three, at least the third one, because if you are selling something or offering something to teachers and students or anyone in the K-12 space or education space, your product needs to be grounded in some learning science principles. It can't just be another wrap-up. So yeah, long story short, it's bad business model and just don't do it.
Just to add to that, I think the best thing to focus on if you're in the edtech startup space would be on the workflows that you want to help solve or improve, and really understand that workflow. And once you understand that workflow, you may well just use OpenAI API call and use all of their hard work and investment, but you'll know how to wrap it up to tie into the workflow that needs to be done. A really good example of that is in Sage at the moment, in the publishing company that I work for. One of the most intensive parts of the workflow is peer review, where anytime an academic wants to publish a paper, we need to get it reviewed by one of their peers, by two of their peers actually. And there is a very specific workflow in any peer review, that you want to look at the methodology, you want to look at the data, you want to look at any biases. And so the AI tools that we're creating around that literally break it up into those sections, give very succinct advice from the AI model that the human in the loop, the reviewer, can then review and say, okay, I want to take this, I want to take that, etc. And really the value that we're adding there is our deep understanding of how to do a good peer review and what a peer reviewer needs to help them. It's not about AI or about the LLM, that's OpenAI's job, it's just that bit. So I would say focus on that is genuine value, whether it's education or research. And then the other thing is there's still so much more that startups do other than their product. There's all the integrations they make with every other tool that the school or the university wants to use. There's the policies that they need to have signed up to and gone through, the data security principles, the guardrails, the community they create. So there's still plenty of value that you can add and take on even those really big players head on if you really understand your space.
I really like that. Oh, sorry, do you
No,
want to
go
move
ahead.
on?
No, go ahead.
Are you sure?
Yeah, yeah.
I like the point where you said the very last sentence. The very
Take
last.
it head on?
Yeah. Because I do believe, and I see this a lot having worked in procurement, leading tech teams in international schools. Working in procurement, I have to procure ed tech, right? I have to procure devices for schools. And I see that a lot. The companies will come and say X, Y, Z and show me a little demo. Okay, great, but how does this help our learners? And they don't always necessarily, I don't speak for all of them. Some of them have great products that are doing some wonderful impact in the classrooms. You need to be able to understand what is the need of the learners. If you're building a product for teachers, then those are your audience, and you need to understand what is the need that the teachers have. And if you're building an integration into an LMS or an MIS, you need to understand what is the fallout, what is the gap, what is not working that your product will solve. So it's basically it's the biggest thing you can do in product, right? What's the problem I'm solving for? Why is that important? Why do they want to use my product? There has to be a need. And exactly as the gentleman said, grounded in research, make sure you understand the process. The worst thing that I've seen in my work as in procurement as well has been there are 8 extra steps in order for this to work. We don't have time. I've got one IT technician, one IT manager running the entire school, and they don't have time to do all of these 8 steps. Oh, you need this amount of internet running through the so you have to think about, I'm going to build this product and give this to the school. Don't expect them to take on all these extra steps in order to make your product prosperous in the school. Yeah, you have to make it as easy as possible for the education sector. And the biggest thing is it has to be meaningful. So again, think about your user, the whole school, the teacher, the leader, the student, who is your product addressing? And if it's for a student and it's for helping them at home, then you need to include the parents as your users as well, because you can't just let the parents try to figure that out on their own either.
Thank you, Georgina. I really like what you said about usability, and I feel like efficiency is like also a huge part of ed tech teams.
Yep.
It's really
But it's one of the use cases that it could hand it over to students, direct their users, supervise it. They could be exploring how to learn fractions better. We've seen many research studies come out that these models are very good at generating practice questions. So there are things that teachers used to take a lot of time implementing in classrooms, but now they don't need to do that. So these things around creating assessments, practicing with the students, and presenting data to them that is scaffolded at their level. There's a lot of personalization involved as well here. So yeah, long story short, I would say that there is value in having, in particular scenarios, having AI in the classroom, but then with the caveat that the teacher stays there and facilitates the whole session, and it's not independent, non-supervised learning. That is one of the many use cases that I'm sure we'll find out as we do many more research studies. But anything to add?
Maybe just to say that Citizens sells into international schools, and I've been lucky enough, as you have done as well, to have gone to some insane schools where there's one school in Switzerland where the fees are 120 grand a year. I mean, oh my god.
Yeah.
And you walk around and you go past a room, and I saw like one teacher with 3 students, and I asked, what's going on there? Is that sort of extra help tutorial? No, that's a class, because the class is so small. And it made me think, particularly in the disruption that AI might bring to like traditional day in school, maybe there would be opportunities for schools that have a very high student-to-teacher ratio to break things up a bit more, so that you could with more tutorial style environments where you get the kind of practice of oracy, and you get good back and forth debates, nimble on your feet thinking, which are not possible at the moment in schools where you've got back-to-back classes and one teacher at the front with loads of students. That would be really exciting. That's what AI could do to change.
I love that. And yes, international schools are beautiful because they have different sort of ecosystems, and depending on the climate, some schools are outdoors, so it's not enclosed like here, you know, we're learning sort of outdoor in the space, so it's really beautiful. And then class sizes are different depending on fees for sure. I would like to add that the teacher is an industrialized creation, right, from the Industrial Revolution, right? And we want children to go to school 100 years ago so that we can then develop workers, 9-to-5 job and all of that, right? So do we need that anymore? No. What do we need the teacher for? We need the teacher to ask important questions. We need the teacher to help students, humans, to learn the human skills that they need for life, right? How to solve problems with, I don't mean like complex math problems. I mean like, oh, my friend punched me at recess time, that kind of thing, right? A human intervention. I'm sure, and I've heard that a lot from parents, they wouldn't want a robot to manage that interaction, right? You want a human to do that. So it's freeing up the teacher to do more of what's important, which is to support the learners in the classrooms. So I do believe they will become more facilitators and coaches. You look at PBL, right? Project-based learning, that came, like, really started to flourish over, what, 2 decades ago now? It should be across many schools, but when I go to visit some schools, I still see some children sitting in rows and there's no even group work or anything like that. In situations like that, there's a place and time for everything, right? So there's instructor-led, there's peer-led, and there's student-led, and AI can provide some of that opportunity so that then teachers can meet with smaller groups, as Matt was saying, and do it that way. But what's really important is that the computers don't have all the answers. Humans don't have all the answers. But together, they can go further.
I love that really comprehensive response. I see we've got a lot of questions here. So just to keep the time in mind, it would be more helpful if you can perhaps dedicate question to the individual speaker or to all if you prefer that. So we'll go for okay, sorry. We'll go for the black top. I mean, yeah, the black jacket. Yeah, and then
My question is to Ms. Georgina. Sorry. As you mentioned, we need lifeguards to guide students in using AI ethically. In a classroom, teachers are the one who naturally play that role. However, there are some teachers who remain hesitant about using or integrating AI in classrooms. They prefer traditional methods. And how can you think we can encourage educators to explore AI and recognize its potential to shape future of learning?
Yeah, great question, thank you. And you know, it's not the teacher's fault that they're scared of AI. You think about like getting something new, it is worrisome. And as humans get older, I'm not a scientist, but I am getting older, and you know, the older we get, the less risk averse we are, right? We become more scared. Our comfort zone shrink the older we get. So depending on the age of the educator, that's another factor. That's why you need a digital strategy and you need to go step by step. It's no good bringing in wrapper AI tools and all the other, even just an ed tech tool. If your school's not ready for one-to-one devices, maybe you can bring in a cart of devices and then teachers can book them out like once a week or a couple times a week and go slowly, and so that teachers don't feel overwhelmed. It's really important in professional development days, like these lovely ladies and this team has put together this panel. Bring people who are really passionate about it, who have really great success stories that will inspire the educators. The worst thing that a leader can do, in my humble opinion, is to say, top-down approach, this is what you're going to do, right? Is to invite the community in. This is the results that I have had success with is when we involve the community in the transformation and ask them, hey, what are you struggling with in your classroom? The answer will probably 90% of the time not be solve what the problem is for. It might be AI, it might not be, but start to have those conversations. Look for conferences. There's ISTE, there's Fetch in Orlando, there's Bet UK in January here at the Excel Center, I think it's called. Go to educational technology conferences, find out groups. There's, these gentlemen probably have other things as well, but you have to drip feed it slowly, but invite your community in to get them to start thinking about it. Does that help a little bit?
Thank you.
Okay.
If I may add a very small thing to Georgina's very comprehensive reply, it's just a recommendation for a very nice resource on this, exactly on your question. There's a book called 25 Years of EdTech by Martin Weller, and what this guy did is he mapped out all the EdTech tools that came out in the last 25 years, and he told everyone, you see, that this AI, like hype cycle, this is not new. This hype cycle has been there when radio came along, when interactive whiteboards came along, when all of these new AI tech tools came along. The industry was pushing these tools down teachers' throats. And then he also mapped why these tools failed in seeing a positive impact in these tools. And the number one reason they found, surprise, surprise, teachers were not on board.
Yes.
So yeah, anyone who hasn't read this book and would like to check it out, definitely read that.
I'll be checking it out. Thank you. I didn't know about that. Same with the calculator too.
Yeah,
We didn't,
yeah.
right? The calculator came out. We didn't say teachers can't use the calculator, but I can imagine there were teachers who said, oh, we're not having that in our classroom. I can imagine, right? It's about bringing your community with you. Sorry, Matt, were you going to add that?
No.
That's lovely suggestions. So just as Georgina's talking about conferences, about EdTech conference and Excel Center, coincidentally we actually have a vet field trip in January. If you guys are interested, please feel free to check it out.
So cool.
Yeah, so we'll go on with our next question. So the lady in the black.
So I'm working for a tech startup, and we do have AI tutor, AI review, peer review, you name it. And once we implement it, we hear some feedback from our users. I can say
Yeah, that's okay.
So we keep receiving feedback that some students they have mixed feelings about how to use AI in their learnings. And whereas we introducing AI literacy, we still don't really understand what does it mean to be a AI educated person, an AI educated learner. So what does it mean for you?
To somebody in particular?
For you.
Matt, do you want to go? Yeah.
Thanks so much. Okay, well, I'll tell you what I would like it to. So I'm hoping to, with citizens, work on this this youth award, and I have this. Does anyone here like Dune? The books and the movies?
Yeah.
So I had this idea with a friend of mine of a Paul Atreides curriculum, and the idea there would be that in the Dune world, not to get too geeky, you've got the Mentats, and they you might think of them as someone that's like fully AI native, and they're really plugged in, and they know how to use AI effectively. But then you've also got a very physical curriculum for Paul. Like his dad taught him to even like that history of fighting bulls and stuff, and like the importance of being out in nature, and then you've also got the life skill stuff about how to be a leader, etc. So I don't know if that's an answer, but for me, the vision I have for that particular course would be we have an AI coach in the course, but it would be very tailored around the individual, and it would be made up of components that you do with the AI coach, as well as components in the real world, ultimately try to create this more holistic curriculum. That was just an excuse to talk about portraits and do really, but I hope that I answered.
It's really difficult.
I just want to add one more thing. I believe that in the world of tech, AI or not, it's important to have an exploratory mindset, that you don't have to have all the answers and know everything. And therefore, in our constant quest for improvement,
all I could do is echo back to things I've seen, and also I feel like Georgina would be better at this than me, but I've seen good examples where in the preparatory schools that Citizens works with, a couple in the UK, so they're primary age children, there they don't have any use of AI at all at the sort of ages of like 7 to 9, they're not doing anything, but maybe they're starting to talk about digital literacy and safeguarding the internet, etc. And then they're gradually, very carefully, introducing it around 9 to 10 with a few apps that have strong guardrails, where maybe you can ask questions, but it's the LLM has been pared back and can only respond to certain things, or it's in a very unique context, like maybe it's a particular app about climate change or something, and it's only about that, you can't do any more than that. And then if it's a continuing school where it goes up to they kind of build on it bit by bit until the coolest example that I've seen upper secondary would be this Paul Atreides thing, where you have, okay, you're going to do an essay where you can use AI and make it the best it can possibly be, but now we want you to do a presentation in 10 minutes time on this subject, and nobody can use anything, you just have to use your own wits. That to me seems really heartbreaking. But I think policy, I would trust you to have much better
I have some
360
experience, yeah, no, that's okay. But I like what you were saying about the constraints at the very end. It's important to say, like, if we're going to use it for this, then we have an agreement with the learners and the teachers that then on this instance, we're not going to use it. AI is not part of every process of a learning experience, and we need to remember that. In maths, I'm no mathematician, but in maths, I don't remember using a calculator in every of my maths lessons, right? And it's the same for tech, it's the same with AI. I equally don't use a pencil across all parts of my learning experience. I use my mouth to speak and collaborate when I'm doing think, tank, compare, share in the classroom. Or I use my fingers to type on a keyboard if I'm typing something up. So it's about the purpose. What is the reason that we need it, and then build your policy around it. My recommendations, if you're going to start with policy, are to think about the users and keeping them safe. So think about your ecosystem from a lot larger, and then come into the user, but the user is always, the student should be safest first, and then all the other users safe as well outside of that. If you'd like some input, I can talk to you after about some resources and websites, AI in education, for example, that you can look to for policy frameworks, if that helps. Okay.
Put around that. Instead, what I would argue is that if you are investing in giving these models to students and making an effort to actually improve their learning, then if you're actually, well-intentioned, then you would take time out and put efforts into training their parents as well. And there is a lot of research from India actually that of a particular tool called Chimple, and what they found is if they just gave the tool to kids, it was an after-school intervention where they kept sending resources to students via WhatsApp groups, not particularly AI in our generative sense, but then I think the learnings translate well. And what they found is just by giving them access to resources didn't do anything in students' improvement in learning. And instead, when they involved parents, trained them, and then always were in touch with them, whether they were spending time with the kids or not, and then building that structure around student learning and students' interaction with AI, actually, led to them finding an effect of, I think, 0.3 or something it was in that study. So, and I could quote many more studies like that just dropping access of these tools on kids without building appropriate structures around that to support that learning, either from the teacher side or from the parent side, is a recipe for disaster. It's not opposite. But yeah.
Just really quick follow-up. So what you're proposing is, a tool is just as good as how well you know how to use it, right? So just dropping ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever to students is not really fit for, putting AI in education.
I may. For example, it's really important to think about your ecosystem of parents, of your supporters, right, of your learners. So parents could be one, guardians could be another, etc. And so when you build out your digital strategy and your policies, when I said you need to think about all your users, parents are one of them. And if you know you have parent communities who come from lower socioeconomic communities, you need to have things ready. Things like a set of YouTube videos. And there are products out there that are not actual technology, but more learn how to. I think it's called DigiGirl. I'll try and get a resource and send it if we have a follow-up later, where parents can work with their children to learn about AI through cartoon characters. And so it's finding, it doesn't have to be a physical tool, right? It could be a set of resources that the parents can access easily from their mobile phone, for example, on their way to work or not. It's not a perfect solution for everybody, and I think the point is we're not there. My observation, my belief is that we're not there yet where we do have a solution for every type of human stakeholder in the education system, and that's why ed tech companies are building, right, to solve different solutions. So we have to keep this conversation going. Thank you for your very important question, because in my experience, it's often parent communities that are last thought of when schools are building their digital strategy. So I'm quite happy that that's something that I've helped focus on. But you have to know your community and then talk to people, try to find solutions, ask them, what do you need from us to be able to help your child navigate this safely, for example. Involve them, as Usman was saying.
Look into rocket learning in India. They're doing a lot of the work that rocket learning. Rocket learning is doing a lot of work with daycare workers. So just tapping into the sort of network of supporters that you have around, not just limiting the training to just parents. So there's so many people around that could be trained to boost students' learning outcomes in relation to the AI use.
It may not be particularly relevant to lower socioeconomic, but something that we did to support the international community was host like coffee mornings for parents. And it may be the same for some teachers in the classrooms. You know, you host a webinar or you host something in person, and the parents you hope that are going to come that need your support don't show up. So it might be the same with parents. But as long as you're offering the different opportunities, whether it's a coffee morning, whether it's stay after school, whether it's come back at 7 p.m. for a training session to help them with their tech devices, troubleshoot, etc., just try to think outside of the box to get them engaged.
I'm from India. I work with NGOs in India. I teach for India Fellow as well. My question is to Usman, because we work with schools in urban settings, rural, and the remotest villages where there's a lack of resources, infrastructure, and I cannot even think about internet connectivity there. Where kids have to trek for 2-3 kilometers there to reach school. So, and also the natural calamities that happen there, right? So they almost go to school for like 2 to 3 hours. And when I was building the curriculum, it was very different from the curriculum that was in an urban setting, for sure, right? So in those 2-3 hours, when I hear people talking about AI, tech, in my mind it's just making the gap bigger, because there's already skills that have to be bridged, the learning gaps that have to be bridged, and how do I take it there? How do I build a curriculum that encourages digital literacy without the network or without the infrastructure or without the teacher capacity there? It's just questions you work in the different sectors.
Yeah, just to probe it more, are you more worried about development of resources or implementation delivery model?
I think implementation.
Okay, yeah. Then yeah, I was waiting for someone to ask that basically, and that from a teacher India round is the bonus. Yeah, so I think a lot of work has already been ongoing to resolve for the last mile delivery, as we say, in low-income context where there is no internet, the infrastructure is very poor, and thinking of these AI models or these flashy things being dropped on kids, it's just not even a possibility. Debating whether it's good or bad is just very far removed on this number, and then on the other end you're connected to a ChatGPT voice model. Now the technology is not 100% there. The latency in the response rate is very, very high. But just to say that there is very cutting edge work here. Organizations, people, very dedicated people working to solve this exact problem that we are discussing. There are so many other tools. There are things like small language models that are often uploaded or downloaded on these low-cost devices, and then they could just, just as talking to ChatGPT, it's not as effective as talking to ChatGPT because it's a very large-scale model. But then, there are the small language models that come to mind. This VMO voice, offline voice IVR is another model. Something else that I have been doing in my past is a solution called Colibri, and what they do is they have a whole learning management system and adaptive learning platform completely made offline for this last mile delivery. So when you start looking